Welcome, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. For the afternoon session, let's start with something relatively light. So we'll do a panel. With me, I have Maria Cristina and Benoit. So guys, why don't you start introducing yourself and then we kick off the conversation.
Okay,
Maria
so
Cristina,
I will
please.
start. Thank you very much. You're a gentleman. So Maria Cristina Mellon, I'm working in the financial sector for 15 years now. I'm working in Keytrade Bank, which is the first online bank in Belgium. And the fact is that I'm working mainly on transformation. I'm the transformation manager and the portfolio manager of Keytrade. Benoit.
Good afternoon. I'm Benoit Granger. I'm working for OneSpan. I'm for a bit more than 20 years working in the digital security space in different positions from R&D, project management, CTO, and more recently as a chief technology evangelist. And my job is and my duty is really to meet with digital transformation manager and to explain how we can put them in this transformation.
Thank you, guys. And here I'm Etienne Yuan, and I'm the chair of this event, and I'll be conducting the interviews for the panel. So I think I started working in the financial industry about 5-6 years ago, before I was in tech. And when I came in, everything was about disruption. So fintechs are going to eat banks' lunches, and they're going to come and disrupt and get their business away. Then I think 2 years after, something remarkable happened. All of a sudden, there was no talk about disruption. We went one letter before in the alphabet. Now it's about collaboration. That was, I think, about 2 years ago. So I was wondering, and maybe we can start with you, Maria Cristina, how do you see the status today in terms of the ecosystem, banks and fintechs?
Well, if you see the evolution, indeed, you saw a fear of the fintechs in the first years in the appearance of the fintechs. But the fact is that most of the fintechs are working on niche technologies or niche businesses, which manage to complete the business of the banks. So if you see a bit the model and the evolution, you have seen that banks have managed to try to find a way to take benefit of those fintechs by developing some model. And you see two types of model. So there is indeed the collaboration, which means integration. So you have some fintechs that have been bought by huge actors in order to integrate the technologies, the knowledge, and the advance they had in that manner. And you have the second model, which is the spin-off model, I could say so, where you see that banks have developed their own fintechs or their own offer by doing some challenges of some fintechs, so integrating them, but without integrating them in the block or in the master tech architecture of the banks, which is always a challenge for banks, because usually they have an architecture which is not recent, while we are facing new technology. What you see ahead is that where we had fintechs, where they were more like startups, fintechs are getting more and more professional and more structure in their approach. Therefore, they also better know a bit more how do they want to collaborate with banks in order to be able to touch the market they are looking forward to. And they are also able to partner with several banks, which were not the case a few years ago. So the challenge is a bit different now. And we are not more in the startup model, but more in a company approach model, where you see that indeed fintechs are collaborating with banks, but there is also the new actors that we need to consider, which are the Googles, and which are also collaborating with those fintechs in order to get into the banking business. I've talked enough. I leave the word to Benoit.
That's exactly what we see. I would say that based on the region and the size of a bank, we may see some different type of partnership. But if we go to very large institutions like in Latin America, for instance, the model that you mentioned, where the bank is acquiring fintech to develop and to integrate and to develop their own solution. Especially when it comes to mobile banking, we have seen a lot of banks developing their own development capabilities around the mobile banking and mobile channels. So that's clearly something that we see. Now, when we see some smaller banks, that's more of a partnership model that is taking place that we encounter in the rest of the world. So we have exactly the same observation, yes, indeed.
So we see kind of like three models here, right? One is let's look at it from the incumbent side. So there's the build, the acquire, or the partner approaches. So could you speak a little bit about the relative pros and cons between those three approaches, perhaps?
So maybe we start if you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you do. No. First, you, Benoit. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. I think the point when you go to a model of acquisition is always the same. How can you stay ahead of the different technology, and to make sure that you are going to remain agile and top of the curve. So that's potentially one of the limitations of getting this kind of development in-house. To the opposite, where when you're starting some collaboration with different enterprise and companies, and when you're doing with a spin-off model, I mean, you can still remain very open to what is coming on and really take the best of the breed from the different proposition from your partner. So you have 2 points.
I would say that in order to complement this aspect, I would say that what drives mainly the way to go is the appetence of risk. So basically, how risky it is to partner or to integrate this company, and you will see that integration of the company will, of course, go with due diligence and those kind of elements. And sometimes it's easier and less risky to have a spin-off model or a partnership model. So it's an appetence of risk, and it's also linked to the technological structure of the bank. You will see that the capacity to integrate new technology is also a main driver in the type of model that you will choose in order to go forward with a fintech.
Thank you.
I would say
maybe
risk and technology.
What we see as well is a lot of partnership on new type of technology, and I'm referring to quantum computing. We can discuss a bit later, but we see a lot of major partnering with some company really specialized in this domain. And here, I mean, that's clearly a win-win situation. So Santander, for instance, is partnering with a company that is specialized in quantum computing in Spain. We do see BBVA as well. A lot of projects ongoing with IBM as well, so and Google. So for this kind of very advanced innovation technology, I mean, partnership between bank and financial institution and fintech are very relevant.
So Benoit, you mentioned something really interesting. Let's talk a little bit about quantum computing. It seems to be like the next big thing that nobody really understands about. So maybe we can throw a little bit of light into this. So what are the concrete use cases that you think that technology can be applied to?
So maybe to start with, quantum computing is it's in an early phase, but it's something that is coming. So one of the first use case I do see is about cryptography. So today, and especially when we see the way we're using encryption in the web security protocol, we are using some encryption key, RSA 2048 bits at minima. And to give you an idea why with existing computing capability based on bits is going to take hundreds of years to break. When we're talking about quantum computing, we're talking about seconds or minutes, let's say tens of seconds. So that's something that can have a strong impact in that domain. Also, we do see that quantum computing can really solve and help solving some problems that are really taking time in terms of computation. So that's a standard problem that the bank are today confronted with, that is taking in terms of computation sometimes days, and that's where something that could be solved in a matter of minutes again. So that's where we do see quantum computing coming.
So this is really fascinating. So there's a lot of technologies that are moving really fast, and I think we've already seen it that the regulation side is like not catching up really. So I don't even want to think quantum computing at this stage. It's like, where do you see, Maria Cristina, are the areas where regulation isn't catching up at this moment that are critical, or say, time critical?
If you see a bit where we stand today, is that regulators are today running behind in terms of the technology. So indeed, the regulation is heavy on banks, but in the terms of usage of technologies, the boundaries of the technologies, how do you want to use it? If you take for example, the blockchain, today, at the level of Europe, or even at the level of the European countries, we are absolutely nowhere. While this technology exists now for several years, and we cannot continue to evolve in the banking sector without having also the regulator catching up and following up on the regulators, the regulatory framework. And I would say there are two major emergency, I would say, blockchain aspect for which we need at the European level to have some frameworks. And the second aspect is artificial intelligence, for which there is huge challenges coming ahead, huge changes in the way we do our business, not only in the banking industry, but also in other industry. But we cannot ignore those challenges that are coming ahead. And I think those are the two main aspects on which at the European level, we absolutely need to get forward.
And I want to comment on that, and it's very interesting. And it was so in February of this year, in 2020, the European Union has issued a white paper describing what could be a framework for the usage of AI and ML. So again, it proved to us that they're still behind. So why AI and ML is being used in the financial sectors? I mean, we still don't have any framework and regulatory framework regarding the usage of AI and ML. That would be, and the goal of this framework would be really to bring some indication about how these AI and ML will be used, especially when it comes to transparency. That's one of the big points, the usage of and the understanding about the way a decision is being taken by a model. The fact that there is a need of human oversight. So where do we need human oversight when dealing with AI and machine learning algorithms? So the technical robustness and safety that we can expect from this model, how do we demonstrate all of that? So there is a clear need of regulatory framework to define the way we can leverage this kind of technology in the banking industry. That's something that is really a must. And where we again see and maybe a second good example where again I do see regulation being behind is defining the way financial industry and fintech are collaborating together. How can they? So why the regulatory rules are applying to the bank and also encumbered to any fintech that are collaborating with the bank, where we need some movement is in the ability to the regulator as well to act in case a bank is engaging with a with a fintech that is not delivering the proper security condition. And that's something that is also getting initiated at the European Commission level.
So we've seen this question a lot from the regulatory approach. So the governments aren't really catching up. But how does RegTech provide business opportunities as well for us? How do you see that aspect?
I have a very good example for you, and it's related to discussion and extension of the EIDAS regulation. And one of the propositions that has been issued during the council from the 25th of September 22 is the idea of creating a secure European e-identity. And because today, where do we stand? Clearly, I mean, when we're talking about EIDAS, we have only 14 of the 27 members that have delivered an ID scheme, and not all of them are really compatible together. So there is a clear need to get something that is uniform and compatible across the different countries, and that's where we see a movement into that direction. And it can be a tremendous opportunity for the banking sector, for the private and public sector as well, to get a universal electronic identity that could be used across the different countries and in the private and in the public industry.
The
Yes,
fact is that on the RegTech aspect, you see that on the RegTech aspect, we are using machine learning to go above the human capacity. So in terms of fraud detection, anti-money laundering, we have made tremendous jumps in a few years in capacity of detecting fraudulent activities or anti-money laundering activities. And therefore, there the RegTech are really essential in order to catch and to help banks in order to manage better their business. Also because AML and Know Your Customer are all very important regulation at European level, touching all European companies. So you need to know your client and you need to know what is your client doing. So therefore, the RegTech can help indeed on the identity aspect and on the aspect on how do my client behaves. Is it conform to the rules? The only elements that now those technology are getting above our brain capacity, and it comes back also to the control that you can have inside the sector in order to be able to correctly frame manage those technology that goes above the competences of most of the specialists now.
So yeah, that's a very interesting follow-up that we should have.
Etienne, that's very interesting as well. That we see the opportunity of using regulation to have a successful deployment of decentralized identity. What I mean is that to be successful, this kind of initiative needs two things. The first one is a standard open protocol, and that's really where the regulator can help. So if, especially in Europe, if we have a common protocol across the different member states, then we will have a standard. And then the second technology that can help in the realization and deployment of this technology is obviously blockchain. So that's for me where technology and regulator can really bring innovation in the digital.
That's a very interesting point. I also noticed that we talk a lot about AI at this moment, and then we talked about, do we have the capacity to manage it and control it? That's going to be a bottleneck very soon. So what were your thoughts about that, Maria Cristina, in terms of, what are the competences that we need to develop in order to be able to handle all this development in AI? Because, we can develop a bunch, right? And I'm not even sure that we have enough competences to develop it. But the problem is, once you develop it, you have to be able to manage it. And that's an even bigger problem. I think there's even less competence at once you release once you release the AI dogs. How do you control them? So what are your views around these questions? First, Maria Cristina, and then we move to Benoit.
Well, it's a rather complex question, because do you need, at the level of the banks themselves, it's quite difficult to have an AI specialist that can manage all. So what needs to be, I think we will go more and more to technologies or tools which are AI driven or AI managed, which are shared between different partners, different banks. And it's also what you see in the security aspect, where you see that some actors are emerging. Now, this being said, you need to also move around your type of competences in order to manage those type of technology, to move to a kind of a partnership also eventually with university, with mathematician, with in order to be able to for once be ahead of the evolution of AI, instead of running behind and trying to catch up on a new technology. Because indeed you will be able to implement it, but then will you be able to maintain it in order to avoid some disruption, some
Maria Cristina, we lost the last part of your answer.
I'm sorry. So I said you need to be able to find new ways to integrate and to manage AI in banking world, and why not partnering also with at the level of banks, at a sector level, in order to manage certain technologies, and have the competences at the sector level in order to manage those competences, which can also include universities and mathematicians. So more getting towards, and you see that in the industry, and you see less that in the banking sector, but to have like a kind of research and development area in banking in order to master those technology and to be able to manage them.
And Benoit, so what are your views about the critical gaps in competence that we have in terms of managing and maintaining and developing AI going forward?
So what I see today is that we are applying AI and machine learning on specific use case. What I don't necessarily see is how banks and financial industry are really moving to a data-driven strategy. What I mean is starting from the data, identifying the data that can be used into the model to inject some extra value to the user. Because one thing that we can observe and that is a fact is the bank are collecting tremendous amount of data from their users. Now, how do you determine what data is really valuable for the bank, and how can you extract some value from this data? And there is a new role that has been defined as analytics translator, and based on McKinsey. And this role consists on really working on the data, analyzing the data, and looking at value that we can extract from this data. That's the first thing. But to really to get successful in this data-driven strategy and implementing AI and on top of it, I think it has to come from the top of the organization. It has to be a strategic decision from the organization at the CEO level, and then it requires to really create some expertise around it. So like a head of data governance and analytics, and then you need as well to, as mentioned by Maria Cristina, you have to delegate potentially the data scientist part to third-party company. But at the end, you need as well to get an IT department that is ready to digest and to put all of that in place, all this value that is going to be extracted by this department, and to put that in operation in this digital transformation to really bring some smart value to the customer at the end. So that's where we need to see the change. And what I can observe is that today, only limited number of companies are really moving into this approach.
Indeed.
So you say that the change needs to happen at the top. What I wonder then is, do you see the competences at the top? So it sounds to me like, you know, a bank at the management at the highest management level should have like a chief data scientist or someone who is like really versed in technology. How do you see banks being equipped for that? A tradition. I'm looking at it from the incumbent side, and then maybe, you know, your comments about, you know, how the emerging neo players can contribute to that.
So from my side, I would say that head of data, so really being driven by data and trying to extract this value. We do see this. So we do see this from a lot of fintech in the market, really data driven, like the Google that we see, where at the end the goal is to work around the data that we extract and to deliver value based on the data. We do see some new players in the bank, some new CEO that really goes into this direction, where the vision is really to work around the data. We do see that, yes, it's coming.
So indeed, it's coming, but you see that, for example, at the level of BNP Paribas, for example, which is a major bank in Europe, they have this position of chief data officer at the level of an executive committee, which is really showing, and you see that more and more into the major banks in Europe, and the data-driven organization. And it's not something new. The fact is that now the question is those data, how empowered are those data chief data officer today? And that's still something which is in progress, because we need also to to be able to change the way we manage the business of banking. Indeed, we are working for a customer. Indeed, data can help us, but we didn't resolve yet the fundamental paradigm between my consumer, but between basically, I would say, the marketing customer journey and the way I use my data. I mean, we are still a bit struggling with having those elements evolving in kind of a separate way, in a silo way, why we should have it more integrated. And that's still something in progress.
So that's I think that gives me a little bit of thought about the next question I have, which is, I think, the question we'll use to wrap up this. So we've talked about digital transformation, and I think that it has meant different things in different stages. So a couple of years ago, you would ask, what's digital transformation? And say, oh, we did an app, right? And then a little bit more enlightened, there was a little more enlightenment, and it was like, well, it's about implementing Agile. And then recently got a little bit more enlightened, and it's about customer centricity, Now we seem to be talking about data analytics, database, and then there's a bunch of other things that may come in the future. So what are your thoughts about, one, what really digital transformation is, and then secondly, what kind of stage we are in? I mean, what is the critical thing that we need to get done now from your perspective or from your organization's perspective? And then what's the next thing that you think we should keep our eyes on?
What I would say is, what is digital transformation? I agree with you. There are many ways to talk about digital transformation. The fact is that also with COVID, we went through the digital transformation. The fact is that in theory, the digital transformation is being able to run your activities as a customer in a remote way. Everything. So this being said, it can be an app, it can be whatever. So for me, the digital transformation should be agnostic of the technology, because what is digital transformation is providing banking services to a customer in a remote manner, which can be in a several manner. Which means what? This means that you need to have the organization which is adapted to respond to the challenges and the context of your customer. And that brings also us with the agile transformation, which is often linked to digital transformation, because this is the capacity to be quickly in measure to integrate the technology to provide the services to your customer. Now, all banks now are digital because we can all provide services to our clients remotely. The next step is not the digital transformation for me, is really I would say the digital harmonization, which is more having a smooth user experience throughout the channels, throughout the needs of the customer, and throughout the different services that they use. So basically mixing, I'm doing my shopping and I have my card shop, and basically payment, do you really still need a bank for payment, or this should be more transparent? So the whole usage and use case of banking should be more integrated, to me, in the flow of life of the client, being more transparent and less more smooth, if I can say so. I think those are the next challenges, and that's why data is so important, because you need to anticipate that flow. You need to go with your client and be able to anticipate that.
No, it's very interesting. Is now, I mean, is the bank to be where the customer are. So to be integrated into the different application from the customer, to be where they need you. And maybe the evolution, as mentioned, is really how do you pilot the operation by your voice, being authenticated and really having the service that you need just operated by the voice. That how do you serve your customer in a way that is going to be a win-win situation? So how do you propose some services to your customer that are going to deliver some value to your customer? So that's really the bank of tomorrow.
Very cool. So thank you so much for your interventions. What I take from this last bit then is that digital transformation is about being where the bank and where the customer and when the customer needs you. And you mentioned two things. You mentioned a lot of really good stuff, but then the last two things that I take with me are, number one, harmonization. I love that word because it's in harmony, right? There is a balance and it's a smoothness, as you say, Maria Cristina. So the experience is good, empowering, and then in order to do that, we need to be piloting a lot of new things. There's a little bit of the spirit of agile there, Benoit, which I really love. It's just like we pilot things, we try things, and then some of them work, and then we build on those, and that's how we build that great experience. And in the end, that's all built on the data that we have, so that we can really know what the customer needs and when we can anticipate their needs as well. So I think our time is almost up. I'll wrap it up now. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, Maria Cristina and Benoit, for your insights. And we'll see you guys in the next sessions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.